Good morning, guys. I've got my coffee and some seed packets, and we're gonna go out to the garden and talk about planting a fall garden. So I look a little tired because it's 7 in the morning and our AC went out last night, which normally wouldn't be too terrible because at least it went out right before the nighttime, and then hopefully I can get someone out here today with the home warranty, but they said 24 to 48 hours, so that stinks. The weather forecast these past few weeks has been horrendous. We've been over 100 degrees every day because of the heat. The nights aren't very cool. They've been high 70s, low 80s. So the house isn't too cooled off. And it's a little warm in there right now. It's 79 degrees. But I wanted to get out here and do this video super early because it's nice. And it's almost cooler outside than it is in the house. So this morning I wanted to talk about the fall garden and how to plant it, when I plan my fall garden, which I usually start planting my fall garden like late June, early July. But I'm bringing this up now because I'm going to be starting some fall seeds, and those are the seed packets that I brought out with us today. So a fall garden is going to be different depending on where you live. Here in my zone 8A in the desert Southwest, I typically start planting my fall garden midsummer to like early August, mid-August, because our nights in the winter get pretty cold pretty quickly. Now, typically with a fall garden, you're going to be planting a lot of cold or cool hardy crops, such as brassicas that are broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, lettuces, and other cool tolerant herbs such as parsley, dill is a cool tolerant herb, cilantro. All of those things that can withstand lower degrees than you would find in a summer garden, like tomatoes and eggplant and peppers. Now, I start most of my fall garden seeds inside, and that's because it doesn't start cooling off here until around September. So if I were to plant these cool loving crops like the lettuces and Brussels sprouts in the middle of July, they would immediately go to seed. I wouldn't get any harvest off of them. Some of them might even die because they're not made for 100+ degree temperatures. But I do start them inside in a cooler environment, usually cooler, not now with my AC out. But I start them inside and I let them grow for 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes up to 10. And then that gives me enough time, if I start them in mid-July, to transplant them out into the garden around the beginning of September, which is when it starts to cool off into the 80s, the 70s, more tolerable temperatures for those cool weather plants. Now, depending on the type of fall plants you want to plant, you also want to know their days to maturity, which is going to be written on the back of a seed packet, or if you can't find it, wherever you bought the seeds from online will usually tell you their days to maturity, which is basically how long it takes from them to go to seed all the way to until you're harvesting that food from it. Typically, most cool weather plants will withstand a light frost, but once you get below 28 degrees, which is considered a freeze, some of them might peter out and die. There are many cold, freeze tolerant plants, and you can buy specific varieties that handle the cold better. But here in the high desert that I live in, when we start freezing, we freeze pretty hard, as in by December we're getting into 20-degree nights, and a lot of times a lot of these cool weather crops not necessarily may die, but they just will kind of like stop growing, stop producing, and then they're in a limbo. If they survive, they're in a limbo until the spring. So you work this delicate balance of trying to plant them when it's cool enough for them to survive, and then try and harvest before it's too cold for you to harvest anything. And you can figure this out by looking at your last frost date. All you have to do really is, there are tons of websites out there you can find your last frost date, but the easiest thing to do is Google your city or your county, the closest town, in Google, and say last first frost date. So that's the easiest way to do it. There's information everywhere out there, and usually it's the first return you get. And then from that first frost date, you want to calculate backwards with that date to maturity that you find on your seed packet and figure out when you should be planting your seeds to get a fall harvest. Now, typically with all the petering out of the squash that I have told you guys about and various plants that have just given up in the heat, I will do a second summer planting. And I have a long enough growing season to do that. I have about 90 more days left in my growing season. There are tons of plants I could plant, like herbs, squashes, even some small peppers that come to maturity quickly, okra, beans. I could plant all of these things and still get a harvest before my first frost. But I don't have a lot of space to be putting things in right now. And space is extremely important when planting a fall garden, because if I start these seeds now for various broccolis, cauliflowers, etc., I'm going to have to transplant them out in a month and a half, and I need somewhere to put them. In a month and a half, I'm still going to be growing tomatoes and peppers and everything that I have in my garden, and I don't want to rip those things up just to put in a baby broccoli plant, because I'm still getting a harvest off of all of my summer plants. So fall garden planning is more than just the timing of starting seeds. It's about deciding where you're going to put these plants while you're still harvesting your summer crops. So these are my in-ground garden beds. If you've been here very long, you know that I've had multiple squashes just peter out and die from squash bugs. I've got one pumpkin still growing there, watermelon plants, couple pepper plants, but for the most part, a lot of this stuff is petering out. I had bounced around with the idea of replanting this space with some more summer squashes like zucchini, yellow squash, something that comes to harvest really quickly. Those come to harvest in almost a month and a half. Super quick harvest rate on those types of summer squash. But with all of my raised garden beds full of summer crops, I decided to just let this area die out from the squash bugs, get the harvest from the winter squashes that I could, and this is where I'm going to be transplanting a lot of my brassicas. So in a little while, when I show you the seeds that I'll be starting, I'm going to do various types of broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower, and these in-ground beds are going to be the perfect place to put them in about a month and a half, because they'll be the only blank space I have in my garden to be planting things in the beginning of September. So because it is so hot here, and then when it becomes winter it gets really cold at night, I actually have two different planting sessions for my fall garden, and I use different varieties of plants to do this. And depending on where you shop for seeds, you can find, let's just take broccoli for example. You can find a broccoli plant that is specifically bred to be heat tolerant, and then you can find another broccoli plant that is specifically bred to be cold tolerant, and these may not work well, vice versa. So what I like to do is in the middle of July, when I'm planting out my first set of fall seeds, I'm going to be planting all of my heat tolerant fall crops. And then in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be planting my cold tolerant fall crops. What this is going to do for me is it's going to allow me to plant out cool weather crops that typically wouldn't do that well in my summer or my hot fall. But because they're more heat tolerant, they should make it through, and I should get a harvest right around my first frost date, just before. And then with the second set of fall garden plants I planted, which are cold tolerant, those should be able to survive through my first frost into my really cold nights, and I'll be getting another harvest of the same types of plants later on towards November and December, if all goes well. So for example, let's take a leek. This is a King Richard leek. And when I was searching for leeks online at various seed companies, I specifically would search for more heat tolerant leeks and then more cold tolerant leeks that would overwinter well. So this King Richard leek is better at handling the heat than many. So this one is one that I'm going to be planting soon, right now, in my fall planting. And then later on, I have two other types of leeks. I believe they're called Tadori and American flag leek that are more cold tolerant. They're more likely to overwinter. So this is going to be the first leek harvest I get. And then later on, I'm gonna have more leeks to plant out in the cooler months, and they should be able to last me most of the winter in my garden. So I'm gonna go through all of the seeds that I'm gonna be starting here within this next week. I don't think I'm gonna get to it today. I have to go into work at around 11:30. But all of these seeds, minus a few, are going to be more heat tolerant varieties than others. And most of these seeds I have different varieties that are cold tolerant, which I will show you guys at a later date when I start those seeds. But for now, I've got this amazing cauliflower. Now this, I don't believe, says specifically on Baker Creek's website that it's heat tolerant, but it does say that it does well in a variety of climates. So we're gonna try that one. I have never grown amazing cauliflower before. Here is the cauliflower I have grown, and it did really well for me last fall in the heat, but as soon as it got a little too cold, the heads just fell apart, froze. It was nasty. So this is the Rober cauliflower, and I'm going to be starting this fairly soon as well. Now here's a seed from Johnny Seeds. It's a hybrid broccoli seed called Imperial F1. As you can see, I wrote heat right here on the seed packet. And I'll often do that if I get multiple varieties, especially from Johnny's, just because they don't have a lot of description on the back individual to that variety. And when I order them, I will go and write heat or cold so that I know when I'm going to be starting those seeds and when I should be expecting to harvest. So this is going to be started. Then I've got Brussels sprouts. These are more of a cool weather crop. They prefer cool weather when growing, but they do take a very long time to mature. So I'm going to start them now, and if I have to keep them inside because it's too hot, that's fine. But I started them too late last fall, and it got too cold too quickly. I didn't get a great harvest off of them. So I'm trying to start them a little bit earlier this year to just see how it goes. Now, these two herbs, flat leaf parsley and calypso cilantro, these are not heat tolerant herbs. If they are exposed to high heat, they will immediately start bolting and the taste won't be that good. But I can keep these inside as long as I need to until the weather cools off. I just want them to be mature by September and October, because if not, then I won't get much of a harvest when it starts to get into the 20s at night. They'll just freeze and be unusable. So this is a new variety of plant I'm growing. I have never grown celery before. It has a long maturity date. It takes, I think it's around 90 days to 100 days to mature. But this is a Chinese celery. I think they are like a cut and come again celery, and this says it is known to be easy to grow and more heat tolerant than other celery varieties. So I'm going to be starting this indoors as well. This will be my first time growing celery. I don't know anything about it, but it says heat tolerant. So we're going to try it. And then this has nothing to do with cold or hot. This is an onion, Texas early grano. This is an onion that has done very well for me. I've grown here for the past 3 years. And I start these seeds now, and then I transplant them out into the garden in about October. That's our traditional planting date in my area for onions. Then they overwinter and I harvest them in the spring. So these I'm just going to be starting in flats. I'm going to use this whole seed packet, and we'll be transplanting out onions in about October, and it'll be several months, probably about 6 months before I harvest those. And then here are two types of peas, Sugar Daddy snap peas and Laxton's Progress number 9. This is a shelling pea, not a snap pea like this. I have never had luck with peas, ever. I have grown several pea plants. It's either too hot for them and they die, or it gets too cold too quickly and they die. I've gotten maybe a few snap peas off of my Sugar Daddy plants in the past, but I am not one to give up. And one day I will harvest shelling peas and eat them out of the pod. I don't know if that will be this year. but we're gonna try again. And I'm going to start them a little bit earlier. Peas are generally not, they don't like to be transplanted, just like beans don't. Shallow rooted vegetables don't like to be transplanted. I have successfully transplanted beans, but I've never tried to transplant peas. And all of my previous failures these last couple years have been because I sowed the peas directly in the ground. I'm going to try and start them early this year and then transplant them out when it gets cool, and we will see how that works. I don't know how it's gonna work, but I really want to eat some peas. So as I said before, the large brassicas like the broccoli, cauliflower, they will be going in the in-ground garden. But that won't happen for several weeks. They have to grow for a little bit inside the house. It's like walking through a little jungle right here. And in about 6 to 8 weeks, I will be transplanting them outside. Hopefully it will be cool enough. We've had a heat wave. We've had a heat wave advisory for the past almost 6 weeks. And I'm just like, why don't you just take the advisory off of the channel? We know it's 100 every day. I mean, it's redundant at this point. And worse news, I hear that our monsoon season is going to be delayed because of the heat wave and El Nino and all this stuff. We just haven't gotten the same amount of rain that we usually get, which isn't much to speak of anyways. And it's been ridiculously hot this month, hotter than usual. So it has really taken its toll on this garden. And so have the squash bugs. This is the Tramontino that was making it. It is now pretty much dead. Thankfully, these 2 fruits got to maturity. They've been here since the beginning. I will absolutely be able to store these over winter, but these were not able to mature before the plant completely died. Which is okay, I guess. I learned something new this year. I took half mature squashes from that plant that died over there, and I ended up making a very, very delicious squash soup. So I will be doing that again with these plants that are laying on the ground. It looks like I didn't get to that one in time. I think I should harvest these guys right now then. But look, all my corn is tasseling. This is so exciting. I've never had successful corn, but with all of these plants here, I'm thinking it may happen. All right guys, well I'm gonna get to doing garden work before it heats up too much. I could have sworn I had more seeds to show you. If I do, I will let you know in the next video. And then I will also be doing a video of all the cold tolerant, well, most fall crops are cold tolerant, but like the really cold tolerant fall crops that I'll be planting weeks from now in a different set of plantings. And that will be fun. I'm so excited. I love starting seeds. I wait till the spring to start seeds, and then I wait again until the summer to start seeds. And it makes me happy every time. Thank you guys for joining me. I will catch you on the next one.